Hi, today I'm going to talk to you about making poop, and that's wild animal poop. And we're going to make that using a range of ingredients that you can find at home or perhaps in a local craft shop. So what we have, I'm going to start with this, which is porridge oats. These are chocolate porridge oats. So you could have these, or you could use just plain porridge oats and then add some cocoa powder. So something that gives it a brown colour. Then we have some water. We have some grass, leaves and twigs I just got from the garden here. We have some dry pasta. We have some seeds. Now these are sesame seeds, although you could use a variety of seeds as long as they're small size like these ones. We have an apple. And then we have a couple of things from a craft shop. So we have these feathers here and this furry textile. So you could use any kind of furry or fluffy textile for this. So why such a range of ingredients? Well, we're going to be making two types of wild animal poop. So the first is herbivore poop and the second is carnivore poop. And these are both from animals that we could find here in the UK. So join me and I'll show you how we're going to make a messy but not so stinky couple of models. Firstly, we're going to make the herbivore poop, and I'm going to model today poop made by a rabbit, which is a common wild animal we see across the UK. So firstly, we're going to use the porridge oats, the chocolate porridge oats I have here. I'm going to just tip these in to the container. So there we go. And then I'm going to put just a very little amount of water in here. So less than about a quarter of the packet of porridge oats I had originally. I add that water and then we mix. As you're mixing, you might find you need to add a little bit more water, so I think I'm going to, it's a little bit on the dry side here. So just a tiny bit at a time. And by the end, we should have something that looks like pretty reasonable poop consistency. So now that we've made the basic mass of poop for our rabbit, we get to the fun job of adding the other components, which show exactly what a rabbit in the wild would eat. The first of these is what we've collected from the garden, so our grass, leaves and a few twigs. So I'm going to put these in with my mass of poop. And then we also have the apple. So while we wouldn't see an apple in a rabbit poop, what we might see are seeds from a fruit like an apple. For this reason, I'm going to cut the apple open and hopefully we can get to the seeds. And here we have some seeds that we can use in the rabbit poop. So I'm just going to drop these in along with the grass and other material from the garden. And now we just need to mix it up. So now I've given it a good mix and we can see that the grass and everything else have mixed in pretty well with the basic poop material. But you might recall that rabbit poop doesn't actually look like this when we find it out in the wild. It looks more like little balls, little spheres. So this is when we can get a bit messy and sticky in making some realistic wild animal poop. Once you have the little balls of rabbit poop separated from the main mass, and you've washed your hands maybe because it's quite a messy job, then you might want to get a couple of spoons and just squeeze those balls together a bit more and make them look a bit more solid, a bit more like rabbit poop that we found in the countryside. Well, now we've modelled our herbivore poop made by our rabbit, we're going to move on to look at some carnivore poop and see what we can do to model this. And for this, we're going to try and make the poop off a fox. For fox poop then, we have some quite different materials that we're going to be putting into it, but we do have the same starting ingredients, and that's our porridge oats, chocolate porridge oats in this case, and our water. So we do exactly the same with these. Mixing the porridge oats with just a little bit of water, and we can always top that water up if we need to. And then we add in our other materials. And with foxes eating meat, these represent parts of smaller animals that they would have consumed. So we have the furry textile that represents the animal fur of perhaps a rabbit. We have the feathers because foxes eat birds too, and that's what we might find remaining of these. But what about the pasta? Well, when foxes eat other animals, they'll be consuming some of those animals' bones. And while it's sometimes difficult to find bones lying around at home unless you've maybe recently had a chicken meal, we can use hard pasta to represent these. But what we need to do first is to crush them up to make smaller fragments. You can start to break these up with your hands, but it actually becomes easier if we're doing a lot of these pasta shapes to put them into a bag and then use a rolling pin or a big spoon to crush these. And here's what we end up with. We'd also want to cut up our furry material a bit to make this fit into the poop better. The final thing to add to make our fox poop is the seeds, so the sesame seeds I have in this case, because although we think of foxes eating meat, they actually eat a small amount of plants as well, so strictly speaking, we could call them an omnivore. So we add all of these ingredients together, and then we mix these in with our starting poop material. Once we've done this, we can get our hands a little bit sticky and messy again by moulding this into the right sort of shape to make a fox poop. So unlike our rabbit poop, the fox poop is quite long and thin. And here we have the finished product, which should look something like this. In there we can see little fragments of the bones from our pasta, we can see some of the sesame seeds, we can see fur, and even a couple of feathers. So a very realistic looking fox poop. And there we have it. So from a few simple ingredients, we've created poop models for a herbivore, that's our rabbit, and what we tend to think of as a carnivore. But actually, as we've seen, because it eats a small amount of plant material, we'd strictly call it an omnivore, and that's our fox.